Yellowstone National Park is home to bears, bison, geysers, and some of America's most wild rivers. But that last part wasn't always true. It's thanks to a certain large carnivore that rivers in Yellowstone run wild today. But let's rewind a bit, because before there were wolves in Yellowstone, there was no wolves in Yellowstone. Between 1930, when wolves were officially declared exterminated in the park, and 1990, no gray wolves lived within its borders. And in the meantime, elk, also known as wapiti, populations exploded. There were just too many elk with not enough predators to keep their numbers in check, so they ate everything in sight. One thing they particularly loved was the vegetation along riverbanks. As elk grazed on the plants, the riverbanks eroded, the willows disappeared, and whole sections of the rivers shifted course. To make matters worse, warmer temperatures at the end of the 20th century led to milder winters, which meant more elk calves survived. This led to what's been described as an elk population explosion. And so in 1995, 41 wolves were captured in the forests of Alberta, Canada, flown by private planes to Montana, and released into Yellowstone, where they formed the first wolf packs in nearly 70 years, the Rose Creek Pack and the Crystal Creek Pack. Immediately, there was controversy. Ranchers who'd lost livestock to wolves demanded they be removed from the park. Ecologists argued that wolves are an important part of Yellowstone's ecosystem and should stay. The debate was heated, but eventually scientists got the upper hand, and over the next few decades, 4 more packs were added to the mix. Today, there are about 100 wolves in the park, split between 5 packs, and their return has triggered what's known as a trophic cascade, a dramatic series of changes that rippled down the food chain. To understand how these changes manifested in Yellowstone's rivers, we need to look at what happened to the elk. Wolves prey on adult elk, and it turns out that elk aren't the biggest fans of being eaten. They've evolved to detect danger using all their senses. They have excellent hearing and eyesight and can smell and taste danger. And when wolves returned to Yellowstone, the elk's super senses told them something was up. Elk are particularly averse to the sound of a wolf's eerie howl, which can carry for miles across valleys and has been shown to trigger physiological stress responses in elk. Once they hear that sound, they stop whatever they're doing and bolt to safety. This changed the way elk foraged for food. Before wolves arrived, elk spent time grazing freely in the valleys. But now they spend much of their time in the shadows of the mountains, sticking to thicker vegetation like the undergrowth of lodgepole pine forests or the shrubby terrain near the tree line. In other words, they avoid the open areas where wolves can spot them best. This change in behavior had an immediate impact on vegetation. Elk are especially fond of willows. A single elk can eat the leaves off up to 25 pounds of willow in a day, which is bad news for willows. So with elk spending less time in the riparian zones, the willow stands a chance to regrow. Yellowstone's streams and rivers meander through the park's valleys, creating dynamic ecosystems where land meets water. And these riparian ecosystems are biodiversity hotspots. Willows and other riparian plants create ideal habitat for a variety of songbirds, mammals, and insects. And since there were fewer elk browsing on riparian vegetation after wolves returned, there was more food for insects like the golden-crowned kite swallow, which needed those plants for nesting material. Golden-crowned kinglets build their nests out of willow stems, and as the willow grew back, so did their population. Willows weren't the only plants whose populations rebounded after wolves arrived. Aspen and cottonwood trees made a comeback too, which meant more food for beavers. Beavers are well known for their engineering skills and their insatiable appetite for woody vegetation. Their favorite meal is young, tender aspen and willow saplings, and more willows and aspens meant more beaver food. Beaver populations exploded. Where there were once about 100 to 200 animals in the park, there are now an estimated 1,000. With this increase in numbers came an increase in beaver activity. They built hundreds of dams, ponds, and wetlands, which together created a mosaic of habitats in the park. These days, Yellowstone's valleys have a patchwork appearance from space. You can see ponds, wetlands, meadows, and forests all jumbled together, and that's the product of beavers building dams across streams and rivers. These dams created deep pools that help fish survive droughts and provide habitat for all sorts of aquatic life. As beaver ponds flooded, foresters found themselves surrounded by water, which meant that they couldn't reach the branches and leaves of the trees they depend on. so the trees died. In the process, a beaver pond becomes a wetland and then a meadow, and eventually the trees come back. In this way, beaver activity transformed parts of Yellowstone's landscape over time. All of these changes can be attributed to one animal, the gray wolf. Its presence sparked a trophic cascade that changed the landscape from the bottom up. Now that may sound like a neat story, but science isn't that simple. Yes, the return of wolves contributed to all these changes, but they didn't work in a vacuum. First, the climate of Yellowstone is mild compared to other places at the same latitude. Winters aren't harsh enough to kill off large numbers of elk. That means that without human intervention, there would still be plenty of elk to go around. Second, humans manage livestock in the park, keeping the numbers of elk and bison in check. If there were more of those animals, the trophic cascade would likely be more pronounced. Finally, hunting outside the park also plays a role in managing the elk population. So while wolves are the star of this story, the trophic cascade wouldn't have happened without the help of mild weather, good grazing land, and hunters who take down elk during hunting season. Together, these things kept elk numbers moderate enough for wolves to make a difference. In fact, researchers have modeled different scenarios to figure out just how much each factor contributes to the trophic cascade. According to their models, hunting actually has an effect similar to the introduction of wolves, at least in terms of how much elk there are to go around. The combination of hunting and wolves has an even bigger impact. Does that mean that the return of wolves wasn't as important as all that? No, because while hunting and climate might have set the stage, the reintroduction of wolves still played a pivotal role. It kicked off the cascade in the first place. And besides, hunting and climate don't get any headlines. Wolf reintroductions do. And it's through these kinds of high-profile stories that we learn about and get excited about restoring damaged ecosystems. Ultimately, the Trophic Cascade in Yellowstone is a good news story. Wolves returned, elk were brought under control, and whole ecosystems bounced back. It shows us that predators can be powerful agents of ecological restoration and gives us hope for the future of other imperiled species. After all, there are plenty of places that could use an ecological makeover, whether it's national parks or marine reserves or the forests surrounding our cities. The lesson from Yellowstone is that if we want to restore an ecosystem, we may need to bring back its predators, even if they're big, charismatic, and occasionally dangerous. Thanks for watching this episode, which was brought to you with the help of our patrons. If you'd like to help us make more videos like this, you can go to our support page to learn more.